Let me talk a little bit about the Mexican economy. As I said, I will try to give some information about the Mexican economy that has to be given before I talk a little bit about the prospects, the short-term prospects that I see for the Mexican economy. The very first thing that I'm going to do is to review with you what has happened in the last 25 years or so. On purpose, I chose 1994 as the beginning, the year that begins this graph. And the reason is because, as perhaps some of you know, the North American Free Trade Agreement takes place starting in 1994. For us in Mexico, this agreement, the NAFTA agreement, and then this new agreement that we have now is very important. I believe that it is perhaps the most important economic policy that the government has taken in Mexico for the last 25 years or so. Here you see a big drop in 1995. And basically it is a crisis that was due to mismanagement from the part of the government, especially the exchange rate policies and the fiscal policies that were used, but also because there was in 1994, the candidate for the presidency, Luis Donaldo Colosio, was killed. And that caused a lot of turmoil politically and economically speaking. And in 1995, you can see this big drop, more than 6% of GDP in that year. By the way, Bill Clinton, the US president, played a role helping us a bit to try to overcome the crisis. And we did, as you can see, in 1996. And what happened is that we had a short-term debt of the order of, at that point, more or less than $35 billion, which was a lot of money at that point. It still is a lot of money. And the government, the US government, lend us the money. The IMF and the World Bank didn't want to lend us such a quantity of money and such an amount. And so we ended up being helped by the US government, and in particular Bill Clinton. I think that played a huge, big role in that respect. In any case, in 1996, there was a rebound. And as you can see, we had from 1996 to 2000, a good economic expansion. Now, not as good as yours, by the way. The US economy at that point was in a quite lengthy economic expansion. If you remember, at the end of the last century, the US economy was growing very fast. And we benefited a lot from that because remember the NAFTA, the agreement, the trade agreement was already in place. We benefited a lot. And from then on, our economic cycle was obviously quite linked to the US cycle. And that has been since then. You can see, for instance, in 2001, the US had a very small recession, but it did have a recession. And we also did, as you can see over here, because of that. There is this year, 2001, is a very interesting year for another reason. At the end of the 2001, the Republic of China was able to enter the World Trade Organization. That is a very important date for them, of course, perhaps even for the US, but also for Mexico, because Mexico, after the trade agreement that started to have a role in 1994, Mexico started to increase its share in the US imports. In 1994, we had around 6% of the US imports were coming from Mexico. And in 2000, this share was already larger than 10%, which is a lot. It is an increase, a very large increase that basically was because of this free trade agreement and a lot of US investment that came to Mexico to benefit from that agreement. But then something happened in 2001, not only the US recession, but as I said, China was able to enter the World Trade Organization, and China, by doing that, was able to acquire this most preferred nation quality. And so China started to export to the US tremendously. And of course, I suppose that other Latin American countries, Mexico now at this point, and even at that point, was transforming to become an industrialized economy. And so we were able to export manufacturers that we were unable to do that before. And so for us, China became a rival, an enemy, a trade enemy of a very big importance. And as you would imagine, we lost the battle for a while. We were unable to continue increasing our share of in the U.S. imports, and for a while we oscillated between 9% and 10% in the share of U.S. imports. It is only recently, and paradoxically, somewhat because of this Trump policy against China, that Mexico has been able to increase again its share in U.S. import share. And at this point, it is quite large, actually. It's about 13 or 14%. That is very important for us because that gives us some hope about what is going to happen in the next few years, as you will see later. But let me go back to this 2001, 2003. This is the period of Vicente Fox, who was from 2000 to 2006, who was the first president in modern Mexico that didn't come from PRI, but rather a conservative party that is called PAN. And he didn't have a very, auspicious period, but here we had somewhat a growth that it is not bad, of the order of 4% in 2004 in 2004 and 2006. But part of the reason for this was because oil prices started to climb up again in 2004, 5, 6. And they continued to do that until 2010 or so. So we had this period of a large oil prices that, as you would imagine, are still important. The oil revenues for the Mexican economy. Nowadays, not so much, but at that point they were still very important. And now here in 2009. And this is the new period. Calderon, another guy from PAN, got the presidency, and he was in this period from 2006 to 2012. And as you would remember, not only in Mexico, but in many countries in the world, the US, happened a great, really great recession in 2009. In fact, it is called the Great Recession. It is not the Great Depression like it was in 1929, but it was a huge recession for many countries in the world, especially countries in Europe, but also Mexico. Actually, Mexico had a fall of about more than 5%, which compared, is somewhat, again, paradoxically, about twice as much as the US economy happened to fall in 2009. And the reason for that is because I believe that President Obama, who started his period in 2000, at the beginning of 2009, and his team, his economic team, did a very, very good job given the circumstances, and they got the right, from my point of view, the right fiscal policies and the right monetary policies, the Federal Reserve Board, as opposed to Mexico, not only Mexico, as opposed to many countries in Europe, including Great Britain and also Spain. Spain suffered a lot in 2009, 2012, 2011 as well, because Spain, as in other countries in Europe, is relatively poor countries in Europe, but they happen to have the same currency as Germany. It is the euro. And if you have a problem, as we did, for instance, in 2009, what you can do is to devaluate the economy. The exchange rate is going to adjust to depreciate sharply. And that is what happened for us in 2009. And that explains this rebound in 2010. But it was not the case for countries in Europe. I think in particular in Spain, because I know it very well. They didn't have the possibility of having this currency devaluation. And so what happened was pretty hard, because they had to become more competitive in their exports by simply having more unemployment and wages very low. There was a huge fall in wages in Spain and in other countries, poor countries or relatively poor countries like Portugal and Greece and so on and so forth. But we rebounded. There was still, the oil prices were still okay. And what happened next was that there was a new presidential term in 2013. From 2012, at the end of 2012, and 2000 until 2018. This was the period of Peña Nieto, who was a member of PRI, the old party, PRI, and it was an interesting period, especially not because of the growth, the economic growth, as you can see, it was not huge. And let me tell you something. You could say, well, the 2%, 2.5%, it is not too low. But to start with, perhaps for the U.S. is not too low because it is a mature and the largest economy in the world. 2.5% or 3%, it is not bad actually. But in the case of Mexico, it is. It is because our population growth rate continues to be very high. Even for Latin American standards, our population growth rate now is about 1.2%. In the US, it should be about 0.6%. In Brazil, it should be about 0.8% or so. So our population growth rate is quite high, and this small, from at least from our perspective, growth rates didn't help much and don't help much. And then in 2018, at the end of 2018, a new president came to power from a new party, Morena. Andrés Manuel López Obrador is now the president in Mexico. I happen to know him since many years ago. Actually, from 2000 to 2003, I was the Minister of Finance for the Mexico City government. And actually, to tell the truth, we did better than Mexico. But anyway, and so I happened to be for a while, and I can tell you more about it in your questions, but I was the Secretary of the Treasury for the first 7 months or so of the presidential term in 2019. From the end of 2018 to the middle of 2019, until I decided to depart from the government because I was not I was not in agreement with the president with a lot of economic policies that he was starting to implement. And here you have the pandemic that has caused so much trouble in most countries in the world, including the US. But again, not as much as in the case of Mexico, we compare the fall. In the US, it was, if I remember well, about 3.5 or so your fall. Last year, ours was 8.5%. It was huge. And again, it was a problem, especially an economic policy, misguided economic policy from my point of view, that I can talk a little bit more about that later. But in any way, here we have this big drop, and of course there is going to be a rebound. For you, it's going to be a rebound, a huge rebound actually, because your fiscal stimulus this year is going to be huge. I was calculating the first Biden package of 1.9, if I am well, $1.9 trillion or so, is about 1.5 times the entire GDP in Mexico. So for us, given that we are so much interlinked with the US economy, it is for us, even if we are doing pretty badly in domestic policies, it is a very good news for us. And as you perhaps know, at this point, the forecast for the US economy depends on who you read, but the Federal Reserve Board is talking about 6%, 6.5%. This growth is going to be about that. And for us, it won't be as much, but it should be about 5.5%. Given this fall, it won't be enough, but still it is a good news for us. Let me go back, however, to this big picture. I'm going to move to the next graph. There are going to be two other graphs, and I know that I have to hurry up. This is the reason, from my point of view, the most important reason for Mexico to not be growing as it should over the last 25 years or so. And the reason is very simple, actually. The reason is that our investment is very low. If we try to have, for instance, a growth rate on average of the order of 4% or so over the years on average, we have an investment relative to GDP of the order at least 25%. That's why I put here the 25%. We have been unable to attain that for many years. And I will tell you in a second the main reason. But let me show you the two graphs. What you have, the light blue is the total investment in Mexico. Say, for instance, in 1994 was about 22%. In 2008, a year before the crisis, it was about 23 and so percent. And now it is about 18%. This is the total investment. And what you see on the blue line, the one that is more, they have more intensity, is private investment. Private investment coming from domestic investment, but also foreign investment. And the gap that you see in the two graphs is public investment, as you would imagine. When we were starting to promote the candidacy of López Obrador in 2018, I had to give a lot of talks especially with investment funds and so on and so forth. I was telling them that we would like to have, at that point, I was naive enough to believe that we were going to have this investment relative to GDP to go up to 25%. This was in 2020. This was in 18 when we arrived to the government. And as you can see, the investment was of the order of 22 or so percent, and private investment about 19, 18.5% or so. And as you can see, public investment has been changing a lot over the years. And this is not because the government doesn't want to spend on public investment and ports, airports, roads, and so on and so forth, but simply because many times the government doesn't have the money to do it. And the reason is because our tax revenue is very low compared even to Latin American standards. Even now, it's of the order of 14% of GDP. In countries like Chile, it should be about 25% of GDP. In Argentina, more than 25% of GDP. And in Brazil, even more than 30% sometimes of GDP. Our tax revenue is very low there are a lot of reasons for that. And I don't want to, I cannot spend too much time on it. But let me tell you that the government, unless, for instance, here, the oil prices are good enough, as you can see, public investment increased a little bit more on this years with Calderon, and because of the oil prices going up. And so oil revenue can help you, and it has helped us somewhat over the years. And sometimes we have had federal government revenue of the order of 20% or so of GDP, which is not as bad as 14%. But the problem is that part of that is simply oil revenue, and we won't be able to have oil revenue anymore, significant oil revenue anymore. And so this is pretty worrisome, the case of the public investment. But also, this is even more worrisome for me. As you can see, private investment in Mexico has been going down in the last 2 years or so. And the reason, from my point of view, is because of, how should I say, because there is no a friendly environment for private investment in Mexico, especially in the case of the energy sector and other key sectors as well. So this is also pretty worrisome. And so if I am optimistic about what is going to happen this year, it is basically because we are linked to your economic cycle, and because of your tremendous growth that you're going to have this year, but not for other reason. Let me go to the final graph. This is not mine. I took it from Coneval, which is the public agency that happened to compute poverty and income inequality and so on and so forth. What I have here is not the official poverty figures, because they come each other year, and the figure is going to come out somewhere in July or August of this year. But I wanted to show you what happened with the pandemic. It was very hard for those, but also for you and for many countries, but for us it was very hard. What I have here is what is called the percentage of the population that doesn't have enough labor income to buy the basic food basket. Food basket. I'm not talking about housing. I'm not talking about education. I'm just talking about food basket. And as you can see, that what you have in the green line is the rural sector, which is much, much poorer than the urban sector, that is the orange line. And finally, the national level is the black line. And as you can see, at the end of 2019, about 37.3% of the population didn't have enough labor income. Let me say something that is also important. Again, that is connects Mexico with the U.S. For us, it's very important foreign remittances, and as you would imagine, And in 2019, and also especially in 2020, our connationals in the U.S. were really a hero for us because they sent to Mexico about $40 billion. That for us, that was a lot of money and can help a lot these people that doesn't have the labor income, enough labor income to even buy a food basket. So this is just labor income. I'm not talking about, for instance, about remittances. And you can see how with the pandemic, in the third quarter of the next year, and the second quarter there was no, because of the pandemic, there was not even statistics about that because everybody was in house. But you can see how it increased. The percentage of people in the rural sector increased to more than 50% to 54.3%. And in the urban sector, from their 33% to 41% in the urban sector, unable with labor income to buy the food basket that is required, at least to have some decent food. It has been a little bit better because of this possibility of people, especially this is the informal sector. It is the people that work in the streets and are able to rebound more faster than the formal sector. And the formal sector is still in Mexico. The employment in the formal sector has a deficit of the order, I calculated the other day, of the order of 750,000 people are still out of work when they were in the formal sector. But that is the story. As you can see, this is pretty worrisome, but our hope is that the growth is going to be large enough to have partly a rebound, not a total rebound, but partly a rebound. You will have a rebound because you will grow for the order of 6% or more, and your fall was 3.5%, but our fall was 8.5%. And we won't be able to grow as much as you will because of many reasons, but in particular, as I said before, because investment. And if we are not able to increase private investment and also public investment in the future, well, we are going to be on average growing in the order of 2.5% of over the years, which, as I said, is very low for our needs. And by the way, I didn't talk about income inequality. Income inequality before the pandemic was of the order, the Gini coefficient was of the order of 0.43%, which is quite high. And not as bad as, for instance, in Brazil or Haiti, but it is quite high. But with the pandemic, I'm sure that this income inequality, this Gini coefficient, is going to shut up to near 50%, which is a lot. Now, of course, Latin America in general has a lot of problems. And in some respect, Mexico has a little bit a brighter future in the short term because of this link with your business cycle. But remember, in the case of South America, they basically depend on exports of oil and copper and agricultural goods, and it's going to be a bit difficult for them to rebound as well. But let me stop there and let me hear your questions, and I would be glad to answer them.